Have you ever looked at someone speaking English fluently and thought, how do they do that? Not because they know thousands of words, not because they are smarter, but because when they speak, the words seem to flow naturally. No fear, no freezing, no translating in their head, just confidence. And maybe you've wondered something else. What if I can never speak like that? If you've ever had that thought, stay with me, because the story you're about to hear starts with someone who believed the exact same thing. And by the end, you may see your own English journey very differently. Before we begin, make a promise to yourself. Don't watch this video as a lesson. Watch it as a story, because sometimes one story can change something years of studying never could. Let's begin. A few years ago, there was a student named Alex. Now, Alex wasn't bad at English. In fact, he knew a lot. He had studied grammar for years. He could pass exams. He could read articles. He could even understand movies with subtitles. But there was one problem. The moment someone asked him a simple question in English, everything disappeared. His mind went blank. His heart started beating faster. And suddenly, the English he knew seemed impossible to find. Maybe you felt that too. Someone asks, "How was your day?" And somehow your brain responds with complete silence. Not because you don't know English, but because speaking feels different. And that difference frustrated Alex every single day. One afternoon, he decided to test himself. He opened his phone, pressed record, and tried speaking English for 1 minute. Just 1 minute. No audience, no teacher, no pressure, just himself. The result shocked him. After 10 seconds, he froze. Then came long pauses, then nervous laughter, then silence. When he listened to the recording, he felt embarrassed. His pronunciation sounded strange. His sentences felt broken. His confidence disappeared. That night, he almost gave up. And honestly, this is where many people stop. Not because they can't learn English, but because they judge themselves too early. They expect their first attempt to sound like their 100th attempt. Think about that. Nobody expects to play piano perfectly on day 1. Nobody expects to swim beautifully the first time they enter water. Yet somehow people expect perfect English immediately. And when perfection doesn't happen, they quit. Alex nearly did. But something unexpected happened the next morning. While scrolling online, he found a short quote. It said, "Confidence comes after action, not before it." At first, it sounded simple, almost too simple. But the more he thought about it, the more it bothered him, because he had spent years waiting to feel confident before speaking. Maybe confidence wasn't the starting line. Maybe confidence was the result. That single idea changed everything. The next day, Alex made a decision. He would stop focusing on speaking perfectly. Instead, he would focus on speaking consistently. just 5 minutes every day. No matter how awkward, no matter how uncomfortable. 5 minutes. That's all. The first week felt terrible. Some days, he couldn't think of what to say. Other days, he repeated the same vocabulary again and again. He made grammar mistakes, pronunciation mistakes, word choice mistakes, sometimes all three in the same sentence. But something interesting started happening. His fear began shrinking, not disappearing, shrinking. And that's an important difference. Many people think confident speakers have no fear. That's not true. Confident speakers simply become familiar with fear. They stop running from it. They speak anyway. One evening, Alex noticed something strange. While describing his day, he completed an entire sentence without translating. Then another, then another. For the first time, English felt less like a school subject and more like communication. A small moment, but a powerful one, because big transformations often begin with tiny victories nobody else can see. And what happened next surprised him even more. A few weeks later, he met an international traveler at a cafe. Normally, Alex would avoid conversation, pretend to check his phone, look busy, do anything except speak English. But this time, something was different, not because his English was perfect. It wasn't, not because he knew every word. He didn't, but because he had practiced being uncomfortable. And suddenly, starting a conversation didn't feel impossible. So he took a deep breath and said, "Hi, where are you from?" Simple, 5 words, nothing special, yet it felt like climbing a mountain. The traveler smiled, answered, asked a question back, and the conversation continued. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but it continued. 10 minutes later, Alex walked away smiling, because something important had happened. He had discovered a secret most learners never realize. People care far less about your mistakes than you think. Think about your own conversations. When someone speaks your language imperfectly, do you count every grammar error? Probably not. You focus on the message, the connection, the person. Native speakers do the same. Yet learners often imagine an invisible audience judging every word. That audience usually exists only in their imagination. Once Alex understood this, another door opened. His progress accelerated, not because he suddenly became fluent, but because he stopped fighting himself. And that's where many English learners lose years. Not because English is difficult, because they spend more energy fearing mistakes than making progress. Imagine trying to ride a bicycle while constantly worrying about falling. Imagine trying to dance while worrying about every step. Imagine trying to learn anything while demanding perfection. Exhausting, right? That's exactly what happens with English. The fear becomes heavier than the learning itself. But Alex was beginning to understand something powerful. Mistakes weren't proof of failure. Mistakes were proof of participation. Every mistake meant he was doing the thing that actually mattered. Speaking. And then came the challenge that changed everything. One day, Alex joined an online conversation group. The moment he entered, his confidence vanished. There were people from different countries, different accents, different levels. Some sounded incredibly fluent. His old fear returned immediately. The voice inside his head whispered, "You don't belong here." Maybe you've heard that voice before. The voice that says you're not ready. The voice that says everyone else is better. The voice that says, wait a little longer. Study a little more. Prepare a little more. Then maybe someday you'll speak. But here's the problem. That someday never arrives. Because readiness isn't something you discover. It's something you create. Alex almost left the group. His finger hovered over the exit button. Then he remembered the sentence that had started everything. Confidence comes after action, not before it. So he stayed, and a few minutes later, the host asked a simple question. What is something you've learned recently? Alex felt panic. His turn was coming. The closer it got, the louder his heartbeat became. One person answered, then another, and suddenly it was his turn. For a moment, everything went quiet, not because the room was silent, because his mind was. Every excuse rushed into his head at once. My English isn't good enough. I'll make mistakes. They'll think I sound stupid. I should pass. The old version of Alex would have listened, but something inside him had changed. So he smiled nervously and began. Recently, I learned how important small habits are. His voice shook. His grammar wasn't perfect. He paused several times, but he kept going. 30 seconds later, he finished. And then something unexpected happened. Nobody laughed. Nobody criticized him. Nobody pointed out his mistakes. Instead, another learner said, "That's a really good point." A second person nodded. A third person added their own experience. The conversation continued naturally, and Alex realized something that would stay with him forever. The things he feared most had existed only inside his imagination. The reality was much kinder, much simpler, much more human. And once he experienced that reality, because confidence isn't built by reading about confidence, it's built by surviving moments you thought you couldn't handle. Every conversation became a small piece of evidence. Evidence that he could do this. Evidence that mistakes weren't disasters. Evidence that progress was happening even when it felt slow. And that brings us to something almost every English learner misunderstands. Progress rarely feels like progress. Let me explain. Imagine you're standing at the bottom of a mountain. Every day you climb one step, one tiny step. From day to day, it feels like nothing changes. The view looks almost identical. The effort feels the same. You wonder if you're moving at all. But then one day you stop. You look behind you, and suddenly you see how far you've come. Language learning works exactly the same way. Alex didn't notice his improvement while it was happening. He noticed it afterward. One day, he understood a podcast without subtitles. Another day, he answered a question instantly. Another day, he spoke for 5 minutes without translating. Little moments, tiny victories, almost invisible, but together they created something extraordinary. Months passed, and then came a moment he never expected. A new learner joined the conversation group. The learner looked nervous, quiet, afraid to speak. Alex recognized that look immediately, because it was the same look he used to have. The host asked the new learner a question. The learner froze, apologized, and said, "My English isn't very good." Alex smiled, not because he was judging, because he understood. And he said something simple. "That's okay, just try." 3 words. Just try. The learner took a breath and spoke. Slowly, carefully, imperfectly, exactly the way Alex had once spoken. And suddenly, he realized something. Without noticing it, he had crossed a bridge. Months earlier, he had been the scared beginner. Now he was encouraging someone else. Not because he had become perfect, because he had become confident. There's a huge difference. Perfection says, "I must never make mistakes." Confidence says, "I can handle mistakes." Perfection creates pressure. Confidence creates freedom. And freedom changes everything. Now here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Because confidence in English doesn't stay inside English. It begins affecting other parts of your life. Alex started speaking up more at work. He became more comfortable meeting new people. He stopped avoiding opportunities. He volunteered for presentations. He joined discussions. He expressed opinions. The same person who once struggled to say hello now found himself leading conversations. Not because English changed his personality, because confidence revealed the personality that was already there. Think about that for a moment. How much of your real personality is hidden behind fear? How many jokes never get told? How many ideas stay trapped in your mind? How many friendships never begin? How many opportunities pass by? Not because you lack intelligence, not because you lack potential, but because fear speaks louder than confidence. And here's the beautiful part. Fear is not permanent. It feels permanent, but it isn't. Every confident English speaker you admire started somewhere. Every single one. At some point, they mispronounced simple words. At some point, they forgot vocabulary. At some point, they froze during conversations. At some point, they felt embarrassed. At some point, they wanted to quit. The difference wasn't talent. The difference was continuation. They kept going. That's it. They continued. When learning felt slow, they continued. When mistakes felt frustrating, they continued. When confidence disappeared, they continued. And eventually, those small actions accumulated into something remarkable. Now, let's pause for a second. Imagine two people starting English today. The first person studies for 3 hours once a week. The second person practices for 10 minutes every day. After a month, who wins? Most people think the first person, but often it's the second, because consistency beats intensity. Tiny actions repeated daily become powerful. A single drop of water seems weak, but enough drops can carve stone. A single English sentence seems small, but enough sentences can transform a life. Alex discovered this firsthand. Some of his biggest breakthroughs happened during ordinary moments. Walking outside, cooking dinner, waiting for a bus. He would describe what he saw in English, talk to himself, tell stories aloud, practice simple conversations. Nothing dramatic, nothing impressive, yet those ordinary moments became the foundation of extraordinary progress. Because language isn't built in giant leaps, it's built in thousands of tiny repetitions. And here's another secret nobody talks about enough. Fluency isn't about knowing every word. It's about trusting the words you already know. Many learners spend years collecting vocabulary, hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of words, yet they still hesitate to speak. Why? Because speaking isn't a knowledge problem. It's a trust problem. Alex realized he already knew enough English to communicate far more than he believed. What he lacked wasn't vocabulary. It was confidence in using vocabulary. Once he stopped chasing perfection, communication became easier. Not perfect, easier, and easier eventually becomes natural. One day, while talking with a friend, something surprising happened. Halfway through the conversation, Alex forgot he was speaking English. Think about that. He forgot. The language that once felt terrifying had become normal. The thing that once required enormous effort now happened automatically. Not because of magic, not because of talent, because of repetition. The brain adapts. That's what it does. At first, everything feels difficult, then familiar, then natural, and finally effortless. But most people quit during the difficult stage. They never stay long enough to reach the natural stage. That's why this story matters. Because maybe right now you're standing exactly where Alex once stood. Maybe you're afraid to speak. Maybe you're tired of making mistakes. Maybe you're frustrated by slow progress. Maybe you're comparing yourself to fluent speakers. Maybe you're wondering whether you'll ever get there. If that's you, listen carefully. You are much closer than you think. Not because fluency is easy, because transformation often happens quietly. You don't notice it day by day. You notice it after months of showing up, after months of trying, after months of continuing, when results seem invisible. And one day, you'll experience a moment that changes everything. someone will ask you a question in English, and before you even realize it, you'll answer naturally, without translating, without panic, without fear. The words will simply come, and you'll pause afterward thinking, wait, did I just do that? Yes, you did, because confidence wasn't something you found. It was something you built, sentence by sentence, conversation by conversation, day by day. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire journey is that nobody can take it away from you. Every difficult conversation, every awkward mistake, every brave attempt, every moment you kept going when quitting felt easier, they all become part of you. They become evidence, proof that growth is possible, proof that fear can shrink, proof that confidence can grow, proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Alex wasn't special. He wasn't gifted. He wasn't fearless. He simply made one decision. He stopped waiting to feel ready and started acting before he felt ready. That single decision changed the direction of his life. And maybe today can be the day you make the same decision. Not tomorrow, not next month, not when your grammar is perfect, not when your vocabulary reaches some magical number. Today, because the journey from zero to confident English speaker doesn't begin when fear disappears. It begins when you move forward despite the fear. One sentence, one conversation, one brave moment at a time. And years from now, you may look back at this version of yourself and smile, because you'll realize something incredible. The person you wanted to become was never as far away as you imagined. They were waiting on the other side of one simple choice. To begin, if this story connected with you, remember this the next time doubt appears. You do not need perfect English to start speaking. You need speaking to build better English. And every confident speaker you admire once stood exactly where you are now. So speak, even when your voice shakes. Speak, even when you make mistakes. Speak, even when it feels uncomfortable, because confidence is already waiting for you, not at the finish line, but in the next sentence,